Once upon a time, not so long ago, when people still believed in legends, there was a man called the God of Slaughter, a man whose gaze alone could turn a person to ash. For the prosperity of the empire, that monster did not hesitate to become a murderer. A man collapsed to his knees, his hands trembling, as he touched the blood-soaked body of his son. He choked out a sob. "No, no, my son, how could you?" Kieran's footsteps echoed steadily, coldly approaching. On his sword, blood still lingered. Slowly sliding down the steel blade, glinting red, the man who was both the worst of tyrants and the most ruthless god of slaughter. He screamed, his voice hoarse with pain. "Why? What in the world did we do wrong, for you to go this far?" The Empire called this monster Kieran, Grand Duke Kieran, the master of Chetan. Still clutching the bloody corpse of his son, he looked up, his voice trembling with resentment. "Treason? You know better than anyone that it's a ridiculous accusation. Haven't you witnessed all this time? That I have been loyal only to His Majesty the Emperor?" But Kieran slowly stepped closer. "I know nothing of that. I only know that His Majesty the Emperor wants to destroy the Duchy of Baton, and that is all." His eyes, sharp and cold, fixed on the Duke as he spoke in a low voice. "So, Duke, this madness ends here." He roared, his voice filled with indignation. "You Emperor's lapdog, don't you see how pathetic you look? Siding with that wicked Emperor?" Kieran's ice-cold gaze was fixed on the screaming man. "You'll definitely rot in hell for your crimes. Definitely." Before the words could even leave his mouth, Kieran's blade swung across his body. Blood sprayed violently everywhere. "I told you to stop this madness," he said, his low voice chilling to the bone, as the man's body collapsed with a deep gash across his chest. "Then at least you wouldn't have died so disgracefully? Like this," Kieran said, his gaze cold. He stepped forward to open the door behind the Duke's corpse. The long creak of the hinges echoed chillingly in the silence. Kieran glanced inside. He was surprised. "And he dared to curse me to hell? A man who collects these kinds of things has no chance of ever seeing heaven." Suddenly, he froze, his gaze faltering as he scanned the room. Something had caught his attention. Kieran slowly approached, his eyes fixed on a strange object. A vague thought crossed his mind. "What is that?" He yanked the red curtain down. The heavy fabric fell to the floor, sending up a cloud of dust and revealing what was hidden behind it. The face of a girl appeared, ethereal and beautiful, with pale skin and wide blue eyes staring at him, filled with a mixture of terror and bewilderment. Kieran froze, a flicker of surprise in his eyes, as he met those clear blue eyes. Seeing the trembling, speechless girl before him, he was stunned. Their gazes met through the glass. Melusine, submerged in water, pressed her hand against the glass, her shimmering blue eyes trembling as if pleading for help. Just then, a voice called out from the doorway. A count pushed the door open slightly and peeked in. "Grand Duke, are you in here?" The castle must have been mostly cleared out. Kieran quietly raised a hand for silence, his gaze locked on the girl inside the water tank. His eyes widened at the sight inside. "Grand Duke, isn't that a mermaid?" Kieran replied, "I knew Duke Baton had a penchant for collecting, but who would have thought he could even capture a mermaid?" "They're just legends, aren't they?" Count Ian replied hesitantly. "The issue isn't his collecting habit. Isn't there a legend that if you harm a mermaid, you'll be cursed to death? Maybe the Duke's death was," he said sternly, his voice firm. "The reason Duke Baton died was his treasonous plot, not because of that fish. As for this one," the girl in the tank moved slightly, looking at him, her voice frail. Her words came through the trembling water, voicing the question for Ian. "What are you going to do?" Kieran was cold. "Clear everything out, leave nothing behind, because all the collectibles in this castle belong to His Majesty." The mermaid's hand scratched lightly against the glass. "Help me," the confused count asked. "Do you mean the mermaid too?" he answered curtly. "Let's go check somewhere else." Hearing this, Melucci slammed hard against the glass, worried that Kieran was about to leave. He said to Ian, "If you said the castle was already mostly cleared out?" He then turned back, his face cold and emotionless, and she stopped, her body drifting with the current, the many wounds on her arms stinging with every faint breath. Kieran smirked. "She's putting on a rather interesting show." Ian stammered fearfully. "Why is the mermaid suddenly? Don't tell me. Is she planning to attack us? That would only make her die faster." The mermaid suddenly came to her senses, her eyes pleading as she looked at him. Kieran slowly answered the count. "I'm not sure. Perhaps she's begging me to send her to meet her maker." He drew his sword, and Ian cried out in panic. "You're going to kill her?" Kieran replied cheerfully. "So what? Didn't His Majesty order that no one in this castle be left alive?" Hearing this, she screamed, "Wait, Your Grace!" But the sword still came down with a deafening crash. The mermaid and the count hastily covered their ears as large cracks spread across the glass surface. Melusine's eyes widened as she watched the glass crack further, followed by a loud crash. The tank shattered, and water gushed out everywhere. She was swept out by the torrent, lost her balance, and tumbled right into him. Her heart seemed to stop at the moment of impact, Melusine's hands desperately grabbing Kieran's collar as the air grew thick with tension. As their bodies collided, the Count stared in shock at the scene, whispering weakly, "Grand Duke." They fell to the floor, soaked by the water from the tank, Melusine clinging tightly to him. Their eyes met, and the moment froze, only their breaths and heartbeats mingling as tears welled up in her eyes. Kieran watched silently, his expression a mix of shock and compassion as a thought crossed Melusine's mind. "I didn't notice it before, but now I see those eyes." He gently raised a hand and quietly wiped away her tears. She gave a small smile, her trembling hand grasping his, leaving Kieran stunned. He was confused and bewildered by her action. This was a story from the recent past, the tale of a twilight melody, between the legendary mermaid and her one and only human. Melusine's beautiful, innocent face was right in front of him, and at that moment, he snapped to his senses, hastily backing away. As if afraid to touch something he shouldn't, when Kieran gestured to Count Ian, he flinched and quickly answered, "Yes." He looked at Melusine, then said, "Put this mermaid in a water container for now and bring her to me. We'll discuss it later." She remained on the floor, her innocent face looking up at Kieran. The room was silent, moonlight filtering through the window and blanketing everything in a faint, hazy light. He thought to himself, "This is only the second time I've ever set foot in this room, isn't it?" As Kieran paused for a moment, a memory from long ago surfaced in his mind. A man knelt on the ground, his voice urgent. "Duke Baton surrenders in this war. Henceforth, I shall live as Duke Baton, and I swear to be a loyal subject of the Empire." Kieran and the late Emperor looked at the Duke, their gazes stern and silent, but he spoke again. "Therefore, I hope your Majesty the Emperor will show mercy." The late Emperor quietly called his name. "Kieran, watch carefully." Back in the present, those statues had been shattered, their fragments scattered across the floor. He said angrily, "Coming to this place always ruins my mood." The Count's voice spoke up, "Sir, I have brought the mermaid. You told me to put her in a water container, but well." Just then, Melusine was standing unsteadily, trembling, her blue eyes wide and her lips slightly parted, revealing small teeth clenched in fear. He laughed coldly. "So you have legs now?" She crumpled to the floor, and Ian's voice answered. "After we dried all the water off her, she suddenly transformed like this." Kieran reached out, gently cupping her face. "A fish that's quite good at pretending to be human. So this is the precious thing Duke Baton was hiding in his castle." Melusine's face was etched with fatigue and discomfort, her brows knitted slightly as her body shivered on the cold floor. Each wound was starkly visible under his gaze, red and raw, a heart-wrenching sight of pain. Kieran raised an eyebrow in surprise. "Look at this." He turned to the Count and said, "You're supposed to treat the spoils of war properly. What am I supposed to do if she's wounded like this? Manage her more carefully." Ian, panicked, said, "No, sir. She was like this from the start. She had these scars the moment we pulled her from the water, all over her body before. The Duke must have been the one who did it." Melusine trembled slightly. Fear washed over her as the memory flooded her mind. Aren't the mermaids in the legends supposed to? The Duke was furious, gritting his teeth and screaming, "Aren't they supposed to create pearls?" He brought the whip down on her bare body. "So why aren't you crying? Why? Give them to me. Give me the pearls, or else." But the Duke raised his hand to strike again. Back in the present, Kieran called out softly, "Hey." He reached out and lifted her chin, pulling her face close. His gaze landed on her trembling eyes. "Are you listening to me? Did that old man have this kind of hobby?" Kieran fell silent, his gaze fixed on her face. "I have to admit, I like those eyes." But Melusine whimpered softly, her lips trembling as if trying to speak. But the words were caught in her throat. Ian carefully pushed him away. "Your Grace, please step back a little." The men behind them immediately drew their swords. Kieran asked, confused, "What are you doing?" Ian spoke up, "Apologies, but isn't there a legend about losing your soul if you hear a mermaid song?" He snapped, "Trusting in legends and letting them get in the way? Once was enough. Even so, I'm still worried." Just then, Melusine struggled to speak, her voice weak and halting. The two subordinates, Kieran and Ian, were instantly on guard, their eyes tracking her every slight movement. She trembled as she struggled to open her mouth. Finally, she managed to force out a single hoarse word. Both of them froze. Kieran asked in surprise, "What?" Melusine raised a hand to tug on his sleeve. "I'm hungry. I'm hungry." She knelt at his feet, her hands trembling. Her voice choked as she begged, "Feed me." Kieran turned to Ian. "Did you hear that?" He stammered in alarm. "She definitely said for you to feed her." Kieran let out a loud, echoing laugh, full of authority. Kneeling, Melusine looked up, her eyes wide with surprise. The subordinates began to whisper, "The Grand Duke is laughing." Kieran forcefully grabbed her chin, tilting her face up. "It seems we found a more interesting prize than I expected. What do you say we take it back to the Empire just like this? Aren't you curious, Ian?" He gently caressed Melusine's cheek. The large ship sailed on, its sails billowing, gliding steadily over the vast ocean waves. Kieran called out, "We're approaching a headwind, tighten the aft lines." And Ian remarked, "It truly has been a long journey. Didn't you just suppress the nomadic rebels on the western border, and then wipe out Duke Baton's entire rebel army right after?" "It's been almost half a year since we've been back to the capital," he replied coldly. "Get to the point." Ian hesitated. "Sir? I beg your pardon?" "Stop beating around the bush and get to the main point." Ian hesitated. "I was talking about the Mermaid. We're about to pass through the Vegas Sea. Shouldn't we release her?" "His Majesty the Emperor ordered us not to leave any survivors in Baton," Kieran retorted. "That thing is not human. Technically, it's a fish. I'm considering keeping it, maybe as a pet or something for show," he exclaimed, horrified. "A pet?" he replied cheerfully. "Speaking of which, what is that thing up to? My fish Melusine?" Melusine was huddled on the floor, hugging herself, trembling and silent with fear. Kieran asked, puzzled, "What's with this look?" Ian lowered his head and replied, "I don't know if it's because she's uncomfortable, but she keeps pulling and tearing at her clothes." Her face was pale, her eyes clearly weary and worried. He remarked, "She looks awful. Didn't I tell you to feed her something before we left the city?" He explained, "I did give her the fish left in the city, but it was." Kieran interjected, "The fish from the room where we found her? There was a barrel full of live fish. I assumed it was meant as food for the mermaid, so I gave it to her." He said, "Live fish? That makes sense. I doubt a mermaid would eat soup or anything fried." With an innocent expression, Melusine opened her mouth as if to speak. He touched her chin, ordering sternly, "Stay still." Kieran gently inserted his finger into her mouth, and Melusine stared at him in utter confusion. How strange. Her mouth is this warm, but her complexion makes her look like a corpse. She whispered weakly, "Some water." The Count's face was filled with panic. "What do we do now? We have to let her go back before it's too late." Kieran immediately asked, "What are you doing?" "She wanted water," Ian replied shakily. "I was afraid she was thirsty, so I brought her water, but when I held it out for her, she wouldn't drink any of it." He snatched the water flask from the servant's hand. "She's a fish, so she'll probably want more." "Than just drinking it?" he asked hesitantly. "What do you mean by that, my lord?" Immediately, Kieran calmly poured the entire flask of water over Melusine's head. Then the two men stared at her expression. Melusine panted, feeling refreshed. She looked up at him, wanting to say something but struggled to. Kieran asked, "How are you? Feeling better now?" Her eyes glistened and her lips trembled as she tried to force out two words. "Thank you." He ordered the Count, "Call the third mate, have him watch over her, and report to me when she's better." Just as Kieran was about to leave, she cried out softly, her weak hand reaching out as if to hold him back. "Don't go, wait a minute." Melusine hurriedly grabbed his leg. He turned back with a confused look, and she hesitated. I. He looked at her with a cold expression and said quietly, "I have no desire to keep a creature that requires so much care." She gently placed a hand on his shoulder. Her other trembling hand cupped his stoic face. He asked awkwardly, "What are you doing?" She looked up gently. "Don't go," she said cheerfully. "Don't go." Melusine's finger touched his face. Their faces were so close their breaths mingled. Then suddenly she fainted, her limp body falling into his arms. Her face was weary, with beads of sweat on her forehead. He leaned down, his voice filled with concern. "What in the world is going on?" The merfolk of Melusine's tribe had warned her. "Understand? You absolutely must get rid of it before you sleep. When you meet your life's serenity, you'll understand our words." And Melusine quietly asked, "I'll understand when I meet them?" "I'm not sure. I still don't get it. I've just found a serenity that I might remember for eternity. And if, after meeting that person, I can hold the most beautiful merchild in my arms." Booming laughter echoed. "Look at this. I've caught the legendary mermaid." Melusine's eyes shot open. She looked around in surprise, her hand gently caressing the water. "This is the ocean. I'm finally back in the ocean. I feel like I'm alive again." Just as she was rejoicing, Kieran walked in with a cup of water and said, "Your tail is back." Melusine was startled. It was the human man from before. She thought to herself, "Did he bring me water both times just for me? What should I do now? I want to thank him. How am I supposed to say it in the human tongue?" Kieran stepped closer. "Are you more lucid now? Ian went to a lot of trouble to get that seawater, so I guess it paid off." Melusine stared at him with wide eyes. Seeing her blank expression, he gently touched her head. "Can you understand my words? Isn't there a legend that you'll be cursed to death if you harm a mermaid?" Melusine looked confused. "A curse?" Kieran watched her pensively. She's practically a blank slate. She probably doesn't even know what a curse is. She saw her reflection in the water and smiled at it. Her innocent and pure expression was just like a child's. He then slowly pulled a knife from his person, his movements slow and unpredictable, and lowered it into the water. She stared at him in surprise, not blinking an eye. Melusine, confused about what he was planning to do, shouted, "I got it!" Kieran's voice was stern. "Hey, what are you holding?" But she was still cheerful, sensing no danger, as the former emperor quietly said, "Look here, Kieran. Merfolk are beautiful, but don't let their appearance fool you. They will use their songs, or their human forms to show you terrible illusions, and in the end, they will drive you mad, just like you are now." Lost in thought, he suddenly snapped out of it, just as she was slowly unsheathing the knife, looking at the sharp blade with a fascinated gaze. She gently touched the blade, her mouth slightly agape with curious delight. When Kieran snatched the knife back, he snapped quietly, his voice firm, "Let go." She looked at him, her eyes confused, but her hand still gripped the knife. As she let go, the sharp blade cut her hand, and blood immediately gushed out. She cried out in pain. Melusine's eyes welled with tears as a thought flashed through her mind. "It hurts. So that thing can hurt me?" Kieran sighed, raising a hand to rub his head, his voice low. "When we get back to the city, the first thing I have to do is teach her how to speak. Even a parrot is better than her." He turned and left, while she watched him silently, her gaze filled with an unspoken longing. You're leaving again? Why? Is he annoyed because I can't speak a complete sentence?" A desperate whisper echoed in her mind. "Please don't go, I'll be good, so please don't go." No matter how much she longed for Kieran to stay, he still turned his back and left, the door clicking shut with a cold finality, shutting out her expressive eyes. At that moment, the Grand Duke and the Count rode into the city on horseback. Drawing the gazes of the townspeople on both sides of the road, they bowed their heads and looked away as the procession passed. A curious soldier peered inside. "Vice Commander, sir, what in the world is inside that carriage?" Ian replied. "It's an order from a superior, so I can't tell you," he answered. "But the fact that everyone hates us is still the same, huh? I can't tell if this is a victory parade or a march of defeat," Ian said to Kieran. "There's a rumor going around lately that if you make eye contact with you'll be burned to ashes." The former emperor really stirred things up, since he's the one who helped you earn the reputation as the Empire's greatest god of death. He looked at him quietly. "But a rumor is just a rumor. It'll be forgotten soon enough. You don't need to worry." He thought to himself, "That's right, nothing will probably happen." At that moment, under the white sheet covering her body, she stirred slightly. The sheet rustled with her every movement. A small hand slowly emerged from under it, out of the water. She peeked her head out, her pink hair sticking to her face, her gaze full of innocence. A voice shouted, "Anne!" The maid turned to look, and the other asked, "Where are you going?" She replied softly, "I just came back from the dining hall." She and another maid burst out laughing. "What were you doing in the dining hall at this hour? Hey, isn't it time to prepare the meal for that person?" As they spoke, they glanced at the bucket of fish in her hands, the two of them saying in a mocking tone, "You really have it tough." "I've only been here for a few months and every day is this much of a struggle," she replied. "It's not that hard at all." The two maids burst out laughing, Kieran's lips curling slightly. What is there to deny? We know everything. Because lately, everyone talks about her whenever they get together. "Oh, I mean the lover the Grand Duke brought home. She's not actually human, but a mermaid, right? I heard they use their songs to kill people." "No, that's not it. I heard you die just from hearing their voice." They immediately turned to ask her, "Anne, did you really see her? Is it true?" She cursed inwardly, "True, my ass." Her footsteps halted in front of Melusine's room, her voice trying to calm herself. "If mermaids were really so scary that they could kill people with just their voice, Lady Mermaid, I'm here, then there would be no reason for me to be alive and well right now." She pushed the door open and went inside. "I'm sorry, have you been waiting long? Besides, this lady really..." Melusine cried out happily when she saw her. She tried to say the maid's name, but only a few faint, unclear sounds came out. "Hello!" Melusine looked at the maid with a bright smile. The maid spoke up. "It's not N, but Anne, my lady." Melusine tried to pronounce Anne, but she just said, "Well, that is Anne. It's okay. My lady can imitate other sentences so well, so why does she keep getting my name wrong? And what's more, even when she was about to die, she would only eat raw fish, and she soaks in water all day. Here you go. Please eat. You like this, right? I saw you seem to enjoy the squid last time." She gently handed the food to Melusine. She held the squid in her hand, her face as excited as a child's, and with difficulty, uttered the two words, "Thank you." Anne was immediately surprised and praised Melusine. "Yes, that's right. You're supposed to say thank you in moments like this." "How interesting," you remembered. At that moment, the door was flung open by someone. Melusine looked anxiously at the door, and in her disappointment, she dropped her favorite food. The maid asked urgently, "Lady Mermaid, my lady, are you perhaps waiting for someone?" Melusine asked back. "Waiting?" "Yes, waiting. I mean, is there someone you want to meet?" Come to think of it, during the first few months after the Lady Mermaid arrived, Count Ian used to visit frequently. "Are you waiting for Count Ian?" She repeated the name. "So that man's name is Ian." Anne said to Melusine in a teasing tone, "Oh, Lady Mermaid, your face is getting red. What is it that you like about the Count? Is it because he's handsome, or because he's a count?" She shyly said, Like, Melusine broke into an innocent, bright smile. Like Ian. The maid placed a hand on her head and spoke gently. The Count hasn't even been visiting lately. What's there to like so much? Please turn around and sit still. I'll tie your hair for you. But at that moment, the only name echoing in her head was Ian, my human, my second siren. Just as my sisters said, from the very first moment our eyes met, I knew he would become my second siren. That's why I don't care how long I have to wait. I can do it. It's not difficult at all. The maid finished tying Melusine's hair. All done, Lady Mermaid. Wait just a moment, I'll bring a hair accessory. Melusine was still deep in thought, because I had learned this from my sisters long ago, that you have to wait a very long time to be able to meet your second siren. The sound of the door opening echoed, and she happily called out the maid's name, but when she turned, it was Kieran. Who are you looking for? He leaned his face in close to look at her, looking amused. You're still like a mute, and your tail, how did it disappear? In her head, she quietly called out Ian's name. Melusine hesitated. Tail? He placed his hand on her leg. Right here. That's right. After coming to this place, I can't even change back into my original form. She thought, maybe it's because the water here and the sea have different scents. Ian! She held out her hands and said innocently, Water? Kieran was confused. I don't understand what you're trying to say. No, water, water. Seeing that he didn't understand her, she helplessly shouted, Ian, water! He grabbed her, and before Ian could figure out what was happening, Anne ran over and pushed the Grand Duke, shouting, Lady Mermaid. She wrapped her arms around Melusine to protect her. Who are you to just barge into a room where a lady is present? Melusine frantically called out her name. Just then, Kieran slowly stood up, rubbing his head from the fall, his anger clearly showing. Huh? He gave a cold laugh. Are you saying that to me? She snapped back angrily. If not you, then who? What kind of lunatic are you? Melusine helplessly called out to her. Anne panicked when she recognized the person in front of her, absolutely terrified. Grand Duke Kieran rubbed his shoulder, his voice dripping with inquiry. During the time I was away, has the ducal mansion established some new rule? Like needing permission for me to see my own property, for example? The terrified maid knelt down. Grand Duke, I apologize to you. I just started working here not long ago, so I haven't had the chance to meet you yet. I am truly sorry, please just kill me, she said in terror, her face now drenched in sweat. His hand gently drew his sword as he said in a cold voice, You were praised for doing your job well, but you have to know. You are serving, isn't that right? Anne trembled, her voice caught in her throat, as tears streamed down her cheeks. Immediately, Melusine rushed forward to hug his leg, yelling, No! He gritted his teeth, looking down at the girl at his feet. Melusine knelt down before him, speaking coherently. Ian, this causes pain. Pain is dangerous. I don't like it. Please don't do it. No good. Thank you. No good. He burst out laughing and brought his hand to her face. This isn't the time to say thank you. You should be asking for a favor, shouldn't you? She replied. Ask for a favor? Kieran trembled, helping her up. I thought you were mute, but it turns out you can say a lot more now, huh? You probably have more strength too. Now you're even letting me hold you like this on your own. That's commendable, my fish. Their bodies were pressed tightly together as he whispered, What should I do now? Since you've grabbed my sword, I guess I have to do what you want, right? Should I kill that maid? Melusine still didn't understand. Kill? What is killing Anne? Hearing that, the maid pleaded, Please don't kill me. Please spare my life. I don't want to die, please. Kieran replied teasingly. You were just asking me to kill you a moment ago. What's the matter? Anne spoke with a trembling voice. I was wrong. I was mistaken. I will do anything you command. Please spare my life. He whispered in her ear. You should try saying, Please save her. Melusine turned to look at the maid. Use your mouth to plead for that maid. Kieran, holding her by the waist, said, Spare her life, I beg of you. Melusine tried to repeat after him, Spare her life. Spare her life. Her face was full of anxiety as she looked at him. Kieran happily pulled her into his embrace, but at that moment she called out Ian's name, causing him to stop. Kieran let go and pushed her to the ground. Fine. I will spare this maid as you wish. A promise is a promise. Anne quickly helped her up. Lady Mermaid. He instructed, But from now on, you must teach her to speak better. He sheathed his sword, turned around, and left. It's unacceptable for my possession to not know my name. Make sure that name Ian never leaves her lips by the time I return. The maid bowed and replied, her voice trembling, Thank you, your grace. I will make absolutely sure of it. Meanwhile, Melusine wistfully watched his back in the dark room, where only the bright moonlight streamed through the window. Count Ian asked softly, Your grace, did you visit the mermaid? He remarked, Word travels fast. He bowed and replied, I heard the new maid was rude to you. The responsibility is mine for not training the servants properly. As Kieran casually toyed with the vial, he nonchalantly said, Spare my life. A confused Ian asked again. Pardon? He explained. I said spare my life. That's what the mermaid pleaded to me. Isn't that strange? Normally nothing irritates me more than watching someone struggle so pathetically to survive, but there's something strange about my mermaid. Ian called to him, "Your Grace." "Just leave," Kieran answered irritably. "Yes, sir." His voice was filled with concern. "Your Grace, the frequency of you taking your medicine has increased rapidly lately. If this continues, I fear it will take a toll on your health," he snapped. "Isn't becoming an addict better than staying awake for days without sleeping?" "I hate repeating myself, get out," the Count replied reluctantly. "Yes, Your Grace." Then Kieran slowly drifted off to sleep. Voices echoed in his head. "Dear Kieran, Kieran, the Emperor's hound." A duke cursed him. "I don't want to die," a maid pleaded, and the voice of the late Emperor, "Kieran, please, save this brother of yours." And Melusine, not understanding but repeating the words, "Spare my life." She held Kieran's face, softly calling his name, and at that moment, he jolted awake. A hoarse voice uttered, "I'm so sick of this." Unsteady footsteps staggered across the tile floor, trembling like a toddler learning to walk. The maid's voice rang out, "Lady Mermaid, this way." She awkwardly lifted her dress with one hand, her other hand gripping a pillar as she took clumsy steps. Anne encouraged her, "You can do it. Just a little further. This way." She caught Melusine and said cheerfully, "Milady, you've taken 2 more steps than you did yesterday. At this rate, you might be able to go outside today. You're amazing, so cool." She copied Anne again. "Cool." Her legs wobbled as she continued forward. The maid asked in surprise, "You're going to walk even more?" Anne watched her and suddenly said, "This reminds me of my little siblings. I come from a very big family. I'm the oldest daughter, and I have 3 younger siblings." "Yes," Melusine replied, turning back. Anne continued to speak. "My family was poor, so my parents had to go out and work, which meant I was in charge of my siblings since I was little, and of course, I changed their diapers too. I was there to see all of their first steps too. They were real troublemakers who never listened, and sometimes they drove me crazy. But to me, they're my precious family." Melusine listened attentively. "If you hadn't stopped the Grand Duke for me back then, milady, I probably would have never seen my siblings ever again." Her eyes welled with tears as she took her hand. "Thank you so much, Lady Mermaid." A voice from nearby called out, "It's the young lady of Marquess Hasno. I said I would be staying 1 more day. Is there a problem?" The maid immediately pulled her behind the curtain. "Milady, over here!" The maids on the other side explained gently, "We apologize, milady, but we are only following orders. The Grand Duke has commanded that as soon as you awaken, then immediately send her back." Anne wondered. "Head maid, so is the woman making a scene." A maid. Leaning close to Melusine, she whispered, "I heard His Grace, the Archduke, summoned a woman last night, and it seems that's her." She replied with just one word, "Summoned?" Anne said in a panic, "You mean she's the one who spent the night with His Grace, the Archduke?" "Spent the night? I feel like I've heard that somewhere before." "That's right," my sisters said. "You have to spend the night with Serenhai to have a baby?" "She's still making a scene and refuses to leave, so the rumor must be true. They say the Archduke always sends them away the next day, no matter which woman he calls for." She pulled Melusine's hand. "I've said too much in front of you, Lady Mermaid. Let's go somewhere else, my lady." She cried out, "Wait!" But the maid pretended not to hear. Watching her back, she thought, "What a shame. I still wanted to ask what spending the night with Serenhai is like." Scene change. Kieran. The Emperor ordered him, "Kill him, Kieran." He could only tremble as he held the sword. The man roared, "What are you doing? Kill him now!" He burst into tears. "But brother, this man is my teacher," the former emperor yelled. "No, from now on he is no longer your teacher. He is nothing but a traitor who sold information to the enemy to have us all killed." Kieran looked up at his brother, his voice trembling. "But it could be a misunderstanding. So please, brother." "No, your majesty." The man swung his hand and slapped him hard across the face. Kieran fearfully touched his cheek. "When will my younger brother finally become a true royal? This is my order." The former emperor pointed at Dukan. "Kill this man or you die first. Prove yourself right here and now." "Do you think you still have a choice?" he sobbed, his voice faltering. "Dukan, it's not true, is it? A traitor. We've been together for so many years. How could you so easily?" He remained silent, not answering him. Kieran screamed, "Just say it isn't true. If you do, I'll do whatever it takes." "Your Grace, please obey His Majesty, the Emperor's command. Do not resist him. Please, punish this sinner." The former emperor's hand gently guided his. "A sword is the scepter of a sovereign. A sovereign must always and only look toward his people. You should not focus on using the sword to wound or to kill someone. The reason your highness wields a sword is to help people." A look of grim resolve flashed in his eyes, mixed with pain and absolute despair. He swung his sword, ending his teacher's life in one clean strike. Kieran's eyes snapped open. He sat up slowly as the faint sound of the maid's voice drifted in through the window. "Lady Mermaid, wait a moment." Outside the palace, Melusine ran about like a carefree child. Anne chased after her, her voice filled with worry. "You must put on your shoes before you go out, my lady." She ran and laughed in the morning sun. her mouth open and her eyes squeezed shut in delight. But Kieran sat still in his room, his gaze fixed on the window, silently following the radiant girl outside. That night, a glass vial slipped from his hand, shattering into 1,000 pieces on the floor. Kieran held his head wearily. It was no use. He said that no matter what he did, or what he drank, nothing worked. At this rate, for the rest of his life, Kieran thought of Melusine. Mermaids are beautiful, sure, but you mustn't be fooled by their appearance. There are stories that if you hear a mermaid song, your soul will be stolen. Was Ian's soul stolen? He told himself that might actually be for the best. Just then, the Count rushed in frantically. "Your Grace!" Kieran exclaimed. "Good heavens, your timing is perfect," he said hastily. "Bring the mermaid here right now." A soldier stepped forward to support her, gently guiding her to meet Grand Duke Kieran. Her steps were so wobbly she was about to fall, and he asked, "Are you all right, my lady?" Melusine struggled to answer. "Just wait for me a moment." The soldier told her in a panic, "I can't do that, my lady. The Grand Duke has ordered me to escort you there immediately." She asked, Escort? What is that?" He didn't answer and led her to Kieran's room. "Please go this way. From here on you must go by yourself. Once you get inside, you will see the drawing room. After you pass through it, turn to the right and you will see the Grand Duke's bedroom." The Count grumbled quietly. "She's certainly taking her time." She struggled to stand, leaning against the wall. "No, Kieran." He asked Melusine, "Have you been practicing your walking?" She answered cheerfully, "I have been walking. I've walked a whole lot." He sat on the bed and beckoned her closer. "Well then, let's see you try walking over here." She said nothing, laboriously taking one step after another on her bare feet, which had not yet grown strong. Her small feet trembled unceasingly as she walked on the cold floor. Suddenly, Melusine seemed to lose her balance and fell down. Seeing her state, Kieran teased, "What are you doing? If you are going to walk, you should at least make it all the way here." Melusine puffed out her cheeks and glared at him, at a loss for words. A few seconds later, she slowly rose from the cold, hard floor, her trembling legs still carrying her toward Kieran. "I made it! I did it!" But Kieran's next words completely shattered her momentary joy. "Wrong." Melusine's arm was suddenly grabbed by him, and she let out a startled cry. "Ah, ah!" The next second, Kieran had pushed her down onto the bed in an extremely embarrassing position. "You were supposed to come all the way here, weren't you? You have only walked for a bit, yet your feet are already this warm." Caught off guard by his sudden action, Melusine could only stare, stunned, deep into his fathomless eyes. Kieran was gently caressing her incessantly trembling feet. "Are you tired?" Melusine shyly brought a hand up to hide her face, which was blushing from embarrassment. "Tired? No, I am fine." Kieran nodded in pleased approval. "Good, now you can sing." Kieran's warm finger slowly came to rest on Melusine's soft lips. As he gradually leaned down close to her face and made his request, "Sing for me, right here." As the evening sun began to set, Kieran sat alone on the beach, staring into the distance. A loud voice called out from afar, "Grand Duke!" The butler stood at a distance, looking worried, gently reminded the Grand Duke, "It's very cold." Despite his advice, Kieran remained silent, his eyes reflecting an unnameable sorrow. "Have you just been sitting here watching the sea all day? What are you thinking about?" His deep, warm voice resounded, "I was thinking that it's beautiful. Because it's beautiful, I want to possess it." Recalling those words, Kieran caressed Melusine's cheek. "Just once. I want to hold it in the palm of my hand." Kieran voiced his question, his gaze dropping slightly with a cold expression. "Why are you so quiet?" He pushed his fingers into her mouth, commanding, "I told you to sing." Melusine answered with a start, "Sing? I don't know how." Kieran's brows furrowed in annoyance as he asked in a low voice, "What do you mean you don't know how to sing?" He questioned her relentlessly, making Melusine flustered. She had never been taught. Or could it be that a mermaid's song can truly bring a curse, so they were afraid and didn't teach her? Kieran mused as he remembered Anne's bright smile, and the sight of a bashful Ian Juster when Melusine said she would be loyal to her and would serve her with all her heart. On the surface, everyone says things like that. The image of Batman, madly holding a weapon ready to strike, appeared in Kieran's mind, but eventually, at some point, they can no longer hide their true nature. Melusine timidly looked up with a wary gaze. "That merperson is a monster, so he will surely harm me." He smirked and continued, "Those are petty, narrow-minded people, so they would probably just lock a merperson in a water barrel." He asked seriously, "Versus, do you understand?" Hearing that, Melusine couldn't help but be startled, thinking to herself that Kieran had just spoken her language. Suddenly, Kieran realized that upon hearing his words, she had smiled radiantly, her eyes shining brightly. It seemed she was indeed named after an ancient word of the merfolk. Right, verses must mean lullaby. He placed his long, slender hands on the bed. So Kieran lay down on his side next to Melusine, gently raising a hand to caress her cheek, demanding, "In short, try doing that verses thing here." His hand suddenly paused for a moment, his eyes softening slightly as he asked, "What's wrong?" Seeing her hesitant and slightly reluctant expression, Kieran urged her, "Hurry up!" His finger rested on her pursed lips as they began to hum a melodious tune, "From the Deep Sea." At that moment, Kieran lay silently, listening intently as a thought surfaced in his mind. This isn't a song. It's more like a magic spell. He recalled a time before, on a rainy day when dark clouds grayed the entire sky, Kieran had unconsciously thrown himself into the cold, deep sea. The spell was helping him recall a very old memory. Despite a questioning voice echoing from somewhere, his heart was still sinking into the deep sea, just like before. "Grand Duke, what are you thinking about? Back then I said I was looking at the sea only because I wanted to possess it, but what I truly desired was to fall into the sea and die." A single light shone in the middle of the lonely ocean. If only I could sink and die after touching it, without any fear at all. If only I could die in the sea. Melusine's eyes, as blue as the sunlit sea, lit up. She smiled and ran to embrace Kieran, caressing him, gazing at his face with an affectionate look. Kieran spoke softly, "Now I know," in the dark room. His warm voice rang out even as I myself said that legends are just legends. As Kieran caressed her cheek and spoke his heart, perhaps it was because of what I longed for most, that she could truly bewitch and kill a human. Melusine let out a small cry, and suddenly he rushed in to give her a surprise kiss, although Melusine was still confused about Kieran's action, but her cheeks flushed red with shyness as she stammered and asked what this was. He gently urged her to continue, as Kieran looked her over and ordered, "Verses, I never told you to stop." He brought his lips close to hers, emphasizing, "Continue, I will devour it all." Melusine hummed her song as she closed her eyes to accept it, their lips touching. It was a passionate scene, her singing voice rising like a sweet curse that could suffocate a person at any moment. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the window into the room as Melusine woke up and shot up in bed, while Kieran was still sound asleep beside her. She looked up, confused, then was startled as she looked over at Kieran, realizing she had simply fallen asleep like that last night. Her eyes widened with mischievous curiosity as she gazed at him, recalling yesterday's memories. What was it that Kieran did with me last night? Feeling a little tingly and also extremely nervous, Melusine was about to reach out her hand to touch Kieran's face. This is usually how one feels when encountering a 2-star siren, and just as her finger touched his lips, he suddenly woke up. Melusine fearfully pulled her hand back with a yelp, but Kieran quickly reached out, his hands gripping her neck tightly. He slammed her down onto the bed, causing Melusine to scream in pain, her trembling hands trying to fight back as she begged with tear-filled eyes, "Let me go!" Despite Melusine's pain, his breathing remained steady. Kieran stared at her with a troubled expression, his jaw clenched so tightly that a vein throbbed. She tried to scream for help, but his grip was too strong, forcing her to only scream silently in pain. "It hurts! It's so painful!" The moment Melusine's scream escaped her lips, Kieran's eyes shot open as if he had just woken from a trance. Startled, she cried out, Let me go!" He released his grip, turning his face away and ignoring her as she coughed continuously on the bed. Kieran gazed outside, where the bright sunlight streaming into the room only made the magnificent view even grander. He muttered, "The sun is up, so I'm not even dreaming." Meanwhile, Melusine sat up with a pained wince. His face showed clear confusion as he leaned in close, his eyes wide and soulless as he pressed her. "Is this how you steal a soul?" Without letting Melusine answer, he quickly continued, "If that's true, then you are useful." Kieran's body trembled as he steadied his breath. He paused for a moment, then said, "Melusine, from now on, that will be your name." Scene changed to the drawing room. Anne rushed over, calling out, "Lady Mermaid!" Melusine also ran towards her, calling Anne's name while Anne circled her worriedly. She looked her up and down and bombarded her with questions. "Are you all right, my lady? You aren't hurt anywhere, are you? I've prepared a bath for you, please hurry inside." "Huh?" she wondered aloud, causing Melusine to glance back over her shoulder. "The ribbon I tied for you yesterday is still intact?" Anne leaned in curiously and whispered, "My lady, you saw the Grand Duke last night, and after that, nothing. Happened at all?" Melusine looked slightly confused, her eyes shining with innocence. She leaned close to Anne's ear and whispered something about last night, making Anne's face turn as red as a tomato with embarrassment. She shrieked in shock. "My lady, you can't just do that!" Anne yelled, asking again, "You mean that's what happened last night? You kissed the Grand Duke?" Melusine paused, pointing to her lips in confusion. "A kiss?" Anne's face went pale as she immediately advised, "Yes, that, your lips, my lady. From now on, you absolutely cannot just casually touch lips with other people." As she listened to the explanation, Melusine remembered the scene from last night when their lips had touched, and that the thing she just mentioned was called a kiss, a very important act, a special thing that happens between people who like each other. She looked up curiously. Vaguely confused by the word she had just heard, she asked, "Like?" Melusine briefly recalled the explanation and the intimate scene between her and Kieran last night. It replayed in her mind like a film. That special act between people who like each other. She couldn't help but wonder, does that mean Kieran thinks I'm his other half too? Melusine recalled that indescribably heart-pounding feeling, her hand reaching up to touch Kieran's face. Is that why he gave me that name? Kieran was about to kiss her hand, looking at her with such a loving gaze, calling her name in the warmest voice. Just thinking about it, Melusine unconsciously placed a hand on her lips. Her eyes closed tight, and hesitantly whispered, Melusine. Hearing this, Anne asked, I'm sorry. She replied excitedly, my name, Melusine. Anne immediately asked back, that's your name? My lady. Are you saying your name is Melusine? Is that correct? Melusine nodded in reply. Her face lit up with a radiant smile. Overjoyed and excited, she exclaimed, I am Melusine. I really have a second name now. The scene shifts to a room, sunlight streaming in through the window, as a stack of papers is slammed down on a desk. Ian Jeter was so startled his jaw dropped. You actually slept, sir? Kieran replied, while looking through his documents. Yes, and I slept soundly at that, he stammered, flustered. You really slept, sir? But how is that even possible, sir? He dropped the stack of papers and looked away. I don't know, Ian Jeter thought to himself. For 5 years after the late emperor passed away, he couldn't sleep well, even with medication. But now, he wondered, is it because of the mermaid, sir? Ian Jeter's voice trailed off. If it really is because of the mermaid, then that woman today. Kieran closed his eyes and finished the thought in a low voice. Did you really come here at this hour just to discuss that? He said sternly. I'm asking what Marquis Heston has been up to these days? Ian Jeter scrambled to pick up the documents. My apologies, Your Grace. Looking at the report, he began to report Marquis Heston has been recruiting soldiers, 10 times more than last year, into his domain. And by the end of this year, he'll likely have nearly 3 times as many troops. Ian Jeter continued his report. In the royal palace and the capital, aside from the nobles who were close to the late emperor, are all beginning to make preparations. He added, most of them have made it clear they will follow your lead, Your Grace. Kieran spoke more urgently than he had at the previous meeting. Yes, Ian Jeter replied, that is how it appears to me as well. He suggested, should we send someone to the Marquis? Kieran replied, we'll be seeing him in 2 months anyway. For now, just keep an eye on him. Ian Jeter's calm and steady voice echoed in the room. Yes, I understand. He was startled when Kieran suddenly called out his name, Count Ian von Jeter. However, Ian Jeter immediately responded, what? He was implicitly asking, are you all right? He hesitated, his words trailing off. You mean, Kieran continued, you know what I'm asking, don't you? He turned to look Ian Jeter straight in the eye, stressing his point. Are you really going to be okay with becoming a traitor right alongside me if things keep going like this? After listening to the report from his chair, Kieran looked up and said to Ian, even though I've repeated it many times, someone like you doesn't need to join the rebellion. Why are you forcing yourself to get involved? Ian continued. Grand Duke, He cut him off before he could continue. I just want you to be cautious. You are the vice commander, not my servant. He shook his head. That's not right. Your will is my will. Please allow me to follow you until the very end. Hearing this, he chuckled softly. My will is your will, huh? Even if those are just words, I thank you for them. You're dismissed. He looked back at him. Yes, please rest well. If you need her, I will summon the mermaid tonight. With one hand on his crossed knee and the other on the armrest, he said, a mermaid, huh? Then his thoughts turned to her. He recalled placing his hand over her mouth and thought, that's right, that fish does have a useful talent. He lit a cigarette. He took a drag and exhaled a plume of smoke, leaning his head back against the chair and staring into space. How long must I listen to that song before I can sleep for good? The scene shifts and a door opens. A soldier standing outside the door announced, the Grand Duke has ordered me to escort the mermaid lady. Anne, who was putting a bracelet on her, beamed when she heard the soldier and said cheerfully to her, see, my lady? I was right, wasn't I? I told you that today. He would definitely summon you. She didn't seem to fully understand, looking back blankly at the other girl's cheerful expression. She continued to chatter. I'm sure the Grand Duke will like it, right? It was a good idea to get you ready beforehand. She stared blankly at Anne and asked with a confused expression, like it? As she left with the soldier who had delivered the message. Anne jumped for joy behind her, calling out, take care, my lady. She happily turned back, smiling brightly and waving. The soldier also turned to her and said, please be careful. Anne watched from behind as she walked away, a smile on her face. Her cheeks flushed as she thought, even the soldiers are treating her more gently than last time. She has spent the night with the Grand Duke several times and is still allowed to stay in the castle. This is the first time that's ever happened. Clearly, to the Grand Duke, the mermaid is someone special. She had arrived in front of his room, her bare feet padded forward, one step at a time. The door opened, and she looked around, thinking, "It's too dark, I can't see a thing. Where could Kieran be?" He was standing in the shadows right near the door. The moment she stepped into the room, he was already behind her. As she stood there confused, he wrapped his arms around her from behind and called her name, Melusine. "You're late." She flinched, her face flushing as he spoke, still holding her from behind, and looked at her outfit and said, "What is all this? Why are you wearing so many useless things today?" She looked down at her dress, thinking, "It's so uncomfortable where he touched me," and she let out some annoyed noises before speaking to him. "Wait, hold on, you seem uncomfortable. Allow me to help." As he said that, he took hold of the necklace around her neck and ripped it off, causing the necklace to break, its beads falling one by one. After he'd removed the necklace, he leaned down to her neck, sniffing her skin before saying, "It's completely erased your scent. That maid truly does the most useless things." She looked at him as he spoke, her face flushing red, only letting out simple sounds without saying a single word. He wrapped his arm around her waist and called her name, "Melusine, how about you just take this dress off?" Hearing this, she looked down at her dress and thought, "Take it off, what does that mean? How do I do that?" Then she said, "I don't know." He sat down on the bed and asked her, "You don't know how to undress?" "I believe I've told you before, I have no desire to keep a creature that requires so much care." After saying that, he helped her out of her dress. She looked down at her own body, now free of the dress, her face bright red with surprise. "This is..." He looked up at her and said, "What's this? Are you only just now getting shy?" But she was cheerful and radiant, smiling as she spoke to him. "This is so comfortable, so comfortable. Thank you." He looked at her with a sense of helplessness because she didn't react the way he'd expected. He said to her, "You're this happy just over a little thing like this? If you truly want to thank me..." He pulled her by the waist, causing her to fall into his embrace. Startled by his action, she let out an involuntary cry. He held her and said, "You have to do your part, don't you?" Her cheeks were still flushed as she wrapped her arms around his neck. She listened to him but couldn't answer, so she just hummed a little tune instead. From dusk until the next dawn, she opened her eyes to the sky, a voice echoing in her thoughts, "Has the sun already risen? I love that Kieran has been with me every day lately, but it wasn't like the last time we kissed. So I'm a little disappointed. Did it feel that good back then?" She stroked his hair, her cheeks flushed as she smiled at him, "But at least we really did spend the night together. So that means I'll probably have a little mermaid, just like Siren the Second, right? I hope our child comes soon, because Siren the Second's eyes and nose are just this beautiful." While thinking this, she slowly leaned down and placed a kiss on the bridge of his nose. When she lifted her head, she met his eyes. She jumped, wanting to say something but unable to speak. She shot up, covering her mouth with her hand, her expression flustered. He sat up, taking her hand, and said, "Melusine, so you know how to play these little games too?" He sat up straight, looking at her and holding her hand. Startled, she turned to look at him with a soft gasp. He placed a hand behind her head and pulled her in for a kiss. "Don't cover it," he said. He pushed her down onto the bed, the two of them lost in a long kiss. Intimate sounds echoed. When the kiss ended, she desperately gasped for air. He kissed her neck and said, "You're supposed to breathe through your nose, you know. Because you're like this. Until now, we've only ever brushed lips." She looked at him, listening, a confused expression on her face. He said, "I'll show you what a real kiss is. Relax your lips." Then he kissed her again. The scene changes to a garden full of fresh flowers. They were all vying to show off their colors. She stood barefoot, admiring the garden, when a voice called out. "Lady Mermaid," Anne said, running over to her with a pair of shoes. "You must wear shoes, my lady." After hearing her, she lifted her skirt and ran into the flower garden, startling Anne, who was holding her shoes. The young miss stepped into the flower garden, walked onto the grass, and bent down to admire them. She smiled brightly at the vibrant flowers, thinking, "They've bloomed even more than before. Last time Anne told me these are called freesias. So what's this one?" A butterfly was resting on a yellow flower, then it flew and landed on the hand of the approaching Kieran. He said to her, "Are you out playing in the garden today?" She stared blankly at the butterfly on his hand, looking up at it. "What's the flower's name? It's moving." He looked at the butterfly, then turned to her. "That's not a flower, it's a butterfly." She heard him and repeated, "Butterfly." He moved his hand slightly, and the butterfly spread its wings and flew away. He continued, "That's right, a butterfly. In your language, it's a sakura." She sat on the ground watching it fly away, still talking. "Butterfly, butterfly." He propped himself up and watched her. She turned to him and called his name, "Kieran, Kieran." The scene was so beautiful. She sat on the ground looking up at him, while he stood with a hand on his hip, looking down at her by the garden. He reached out and flicked her on the forehead, saying, "Your effort to remember my name is commendable, but your pronunciation is awful. Practice it until it's correct." She yelped in pain from the flick on her forehead, then nodded painfully. "Practice." He turned to leave, saying as he walked, "I'll call your handmaiden. You've seen enough. Go inside now." She shot to her feet, thinking, "Is he leaving already?" Then she said, enunciating each word, "Go together. I want to go with you too." He stopped, turned his head to look at her, and then uttered 2 words, "Suit yourself." Hearing this, she was overjoyed, her small, lovely face filled with happiness and excitement. She happily ran after him barefoot while holding up her skirt, as Anne chased after her clutching the shoes and calling out, "Young miss!" The next scene was the soldiers' training ground. The piercing sound of clashing swords filled the air as she stood by the entrance, peeking inside. She entered the training grounds full of excitement and curiosity, while Anne watched her helplessly, nagging, honestly, how could you possibly follow the Grand Duke to the training grounds? If His Grace hadn't turned a blind eye, you and I would have been thrown out immediately. Are you even listening to me? This place is dangerous. You could get hurt by just wandering in." She seemed to pay no mind to Anne's words, and continued to watch the soldiers practicing with their swords. Then she called out, "Anne, look over there." Yes. In the direction she pointed, there he was, sitting majestically on a horse and holding the reins. She said, "It's Kieran, it's Kieran." Anne replied, Yes, the Grand Duke is truly exceptional. My father was a soldier in Titan Castle too. He said that the Grand Duke is the only commander-in-chief who always participates in every training session." From his horse he yelled, "Good work, training is dismissed." The soldiers below shouted in unison, "Thank you, Your Grace." Anne was still chattering away, saying, "If my father hadn't passed away on the battlefield, he would also be." Before she could finish her sentence, the young miss had already skipped happily after him, saying, "Kieran is leaving!" Anne called out in surprise, "Oh, young miss, wait a moment. You keep following His Grace around. You can't do that." But she just kept running happily after him, smiling and talking as she went. "Up to you?" She flinched. "What kind of nonsense are you spouting now?" Inside the building, she was still happily peeking through the crack in the door, while a terrified, sweating Anne whispered to her, "This really isn't okay, milady. Let's go back to our room. If we get caught, the punishment will be very severe." Inside the room, he and Ian were eating, drinking, and talking. She watched them and spoke. "What's wrong?" She was crying internally as she said, "The Grand Duke is having a meal with the Count. They're clearly having a very serious conversation, so we can't possibly disturb them." Hearing Anne, she thought of her fish and looked at the maid. "Food?" The maid startled, remembering what she ate, and replied, "No, not what you ate, milady." Someone from the room opened the door and spoke to the two, whispering outside, while she was squatting and looking at her maid. The maid knelt down, her face pale, and said in a trembling voice, "I apologize. We'll leave right now, so please." Before she could finish, the man interrupted, "It's not about that." The man scratched his face. Since the Grand Duke finds it very bothersome, he ordered that the young lady shouldn't wait on the ground like that, but should come inside. Anne was bewildered and confused, saying, "What?" Meanwhile, her face lit up with a bright smile. Meanwhile, Kieran was sitting at the dining table inside, raising his wine glass for a drink as he and Ian talked while they ate. "Your Majesty, so how much was spent this time?" "About 6 million po." Apparently, His Majesty had heard the report about the purchase of the diamond mining region a few days ago, but for some reason, he keeps buying up mining regions that yield no gemstones whatsoever. It seems to be because Marquis Hasno is constantly egging him on. That old geezer is probably getting pretty antsy, desperate to drain the national treasury. When will the Star Palace be completed? This year. While the two of them were talking, she held a fork in one hand and a knife in the other, struggling intently to cut her fish. Ian saw her and burst out laughing, while he sipped his wine and watched him. He coughed, trying to suppress his laughter, and turned to him, "My apologies. Around the beginning of winter this year, I heard that once the interior decorations are finished, it will be complete. In order to have it ready for the National Day celebration, they've used up all available manpower, which has caused a lot of discontent among the nobility." He picked up a napkin to wipe his mouth and turned to her. She flinched and froze, then looked back at him guiltily. He let out a sigh and continued his conversation with Ian. This is the first time he's been able to escape the supervision of the late emperor, so he'll probably be dancing with joy for a while. It's also a good thing for Marquis Hasno. Yes, we can also use this opportunity to pull the neutral families to our side. He was in the middle of speaking when the sound of a knife hitting the floor and her unconscious shriek interrupted him. He turned to look at her and smiled. "My goodness, I went through all this trouble to invite you to eat, and you can't even eat properly, Melusine." At this, Ian on the side looked at him and her in shocked surprise. She, with a fork still in one hand and the other empty, stared at him, speechless. He continued, "I told the maid to prepare the things you eat every day. Does it not taste good today?" She pointed her knife and fork at him, shook her head, and said word by word, "What is this, Kieran?" Ian, who was drinking wine, choked when he heard her, coughing as he spoke. He ignored him when she called his name just now, and turned to talk to her. "That's wrong. You have to pronounce it with the stress on the first syllable, and say the rest more gently." After hearing him, she said his name again, Kieran. "You still need more practice. If you find using a fork inconvenient, Then just eat however you feel comfortable. Don't just sit there doing nothing. Her face lit up with a brilliant smile when she heard him. The comfortable way? I will eat then. I'll eat very well. After saying that, she immediately grabbed the fish with both hands and took a huge bite. He watched her eat with a look of helpless confusion. He rested his chin on his hand, watching her. Melusine, you really make that look delicious. It's that delicious? She asked with a radiant smile as she chewed. It's very good, thank you, Kieran. He used his hand to wipe her mouth. Ian watched their interaction, growing even more baffled. The Archduke continued as he acted. Go on, keep talking. How many families are you planning on pulling to our side? Yes, about that, he thought while watching the scene before him. What in the world is happening right in front of my eyes? The scene changes to the soldiers' training grounds. She stood peeking from the gate, with her hair in a ponytail and a blue dress, looking into the training yard and thinking, I have to be persistent. Suddenly at that moment, Ian was speaking with the Archduke. What? I mean that mermaid? Because lately I've noticed she seems to be by your side quite often, he replied while wiping his sweat. Just ignore her. Then he turned to look in her direction. It's amusing though, standing there like that and thinking she's actually hiding from people. So this is what you consider amusing? Watching an animal slowly being tamed is an amusing thing. Have you ever tamed an animal before, Your Grace? I don't know. He thought back to the past. 15 years ago, a voice rang out. This little one is very obedient to the Archduke. An image of a fox nuzzling affectionately against a person's leg. A man was kneeling and continued to speak. It's very rare for a wild fox to follow a human. This is truly a miracle. His younger self was holding the fox and said, It just keeps following me around. It's so annoying. Even though you say that, I know you let the fox into your room every night. If you really want to raise it, then you should give it a name. I mean, don't just lose it like this. The fox clung to his shoulder and licked his fingers. The scene shifts to a room where his younger self was holding the fox, hiding under something. His small face filled with worry as he spoke to the little fox. You understand? You absolutely cannot leave this spot today. My older brother is coming. He's going to hunt here, and if my brother happens to find you, so you absolutely must not go outside. Absolutely not. The next scene is in a forest, where he stood before the fox, which was lying on the ground, barely breathing, with a long gash on its belly. The scene returns to the present. He stared off into the distance, and an image of the little fox with a chain around its neck appeared. Then he said, That's right. I did raise a pet once before. Did you know that, Ian? After capturing an animal, the very first thing you must do is to build a sturdy cage and confine the beast within that cage. And you must make them understand that in the end, they can never escape from that place, not even in death. Just then, a maid was standing behind her, and she turned to the maid with a bright smile. He brought her to the seashore, and she looked at it with delight, exclaiming, Kieran, it's the ocean. Standing behind her, he watched and asked, You like it that much? If you like it so much, go take a closer look. She turned back to him, and Kieran said, I'll wait here. There's something I need to confirm. Her bare feet sank into the sand as the murmuring waves splashed against them. She glanced back at him and asked, Confirm? The wild fox lay gasping on the ground, fresh blood trickling from the corner of its mouth and a long gash on its belly. Kieran's eyes were vacant as he stared at it, choked with emotion. Why? I told you not to go outside. I told you so many times. How could this... Just as he was about to approach and pick up the fox, a flurry of shouts echoed nearby. Over here! Corner it over here! Kieran trembled all over, his face pale and helpless. At this rate, his brother would definitely catch him. If it were caught, it would surely be killed brutally. In that case, it was better. Better to return to the present. Meanwhile, Melusine was gleefully running toward the lapping waves, her small feet touching the cool water. Ian, in a panic, started to run and stop her. Grand Duke, the mermaids are. He raised a hand to stop him. Leave it. I'm testing to see if she'll actually try to escape. Melusine's feet were now submerged in the water, and because of it, scales began to appear as her fishtail started to materialize. Melusine savored the familiar sensation with delight. It's been so long since I've been in the ocean. This is amazing. Ian's jaw dropped. Your Grace, look! The tail appeared as soon as she touched the seawater. Just then, Kieran called out in a cold voice, Melusine. Hearing him, she turned her head. She simply thought, I'll just go in for a little bit and then get out. That should be allowed, right? When he saw that Melusine wasn't coming back, his face paled with anger. He yelled, Melusine, get back here. But she just gave an innocent bright smile and replied, Just a minute. Besides, Kieran was the one who said I could get closer to the ocean. With that, Melusine flicked her beautiful tail and dove into the ocean waves before she could hear his final words. You can't just go off on your own. A splash echoed across the surface of the water. Ian stammered, She's gone. Kieran's expression darkened. He gritted his teeth so hard a vein bulged on his face, growling through clenched teeth. Melusine, how dare you? Without another moment's hesitation, Kieran dashed toward the ocean. Ignoring Ian's call of Grand Duke, scenes from the past flashed back to him, the memory of him playing with the little fox. And the butler had advised him, "Your Highness, if you truly wish to keep it, then you must give it a name. What I mean is, don't lose it so carelessly." Now Kieran's mind was a chaotic, dark mess. A name alone isn't enough to keep something. It was the same with the fox back then. If he had used a chain instead of a name, it wouldn't have gotten caught in that trap. If you don't hold on to something properly, someone else will eventually take it from you. If that's the case, it's better to be the one to do it yourself. A moment later, Melusine emerged from the water. Her fishtail had already transformed back into a pair of small feet, and water dripped from her soaked dress. She gently brushed her drenched hair back with her hand and looked up. Seeing Kieran rushing toward her, a surprised Melusine started to speak. "Kieran, Before she could get another word out, he yanked her forward by the arm, wrapping his other arm tightly around her waist and pulling her body flush against his. Kieran bent down and forcefully kissed her lips. Melusine struggled to part them for air, her voice stifled. Kieran didn't let her say a word, their lips clinging together. Then suddenly, a dagger was pointed at Melusine's neck. Kieran grabbed her hair, yanking it back as he coldly questioned her. "You miss the sea that much? Enough to just leave like that?" Melusine turned pale, stammering an explanation. "I'm not leaving, I'm not! I was just taking a walk, I never intended to leave." But by now Kieran was blinded by rage. How could I possibly believe that? I guess you can't let an animal run free without a leash after all. Those words left Melusine stunned, her voice trembling. "Kieran," he lifted his lips into a cold smirk. "The mistake was mine. I thought you were naive, so I let my guard down." Melusine was filled with confusion. Kieran was being so strange. He suddenly spun her around to face the sea, his voice a low growl. "Melusine, take a good long look at the sea, because you're never going to see it again." Melusine was horrified by his words. How could that be? But before she could finish her thought, Kieran yanked her arm, dragging her away as she screamed in pain. "Kieran!" Ian rushed over from behind. "Grand Duke." He paused, glanced at Ian, and commanded, "Everyone, return to the castle. I will not be staying with the main party tonight. I will be using the nearby guard post. Relay that message to the servants." That night, a full moon hung high in the sky, its cold light spilling over the small house at the guard post, touching every corner of the walls. Kieran dragged Melusine by the wrist. She cried out desperately, her voice trembling. "Kieran! Kieran! Let me go!" He didn't let Melusine say another word, forcefully pushing her onto the bed even as her wet dress clung to her body. Kieran didn't say a word, only raising his hands to unbutton his cuffs, then moving to loosen the collar of his shirt. Melusine let out a soft whimper of pain from the bed. He slowly climbed onto it, staring intently at her, causing Melusine to blush and turn her face away from his gaze. Kieran remained silent, propping himself up with one hand on the bed, while his other hand gripped her waist, forcing Melusine to look directly into his eyes. He finally spoke, his voice deliberate. "What should I do with you? Even if I put a collar around your neck, you'd just take it right off. Tying you up here wouldn't be any fun either." Kieran's hand rose to caress Melusine's cheek, making her instinctively recoil. His voice lowered. "Melusine, I am the one who gave you a name. Therefore, you must obey me." His finger traveled down from her face, pressing lightly on the tip of Melusine's tongue, making it hard for her to speak. "Obey." He continued to toy with her small tongue. "When Kieran says, 'I am yours,' so you will only look at me and obey me." After speaking, he watched her intently. Melusine slowly spoke, "I am yours." Her cheeks flushed red, her eyes full of innocence, and she repeated it once more fluently. "I am yours." Kieran couldn't help but lift his lips into a smirk, letting out a soft, cold laugh. Then he suddenly squeezed Melusine's cheeks, forcing her mouth open. Kieran leaned down, his hot tongue finding its way to her parted lips. Amidst their heated breaths, he repeated his demand. You are not to act on your own ever again." Kieran's large frame pressed Melusine down onto the bed, their lips and tongues tangling inseparably. Soft gasps echoed throughout the room. But he didn't stop there. His two fingers entered her mouth again, probing and stirring within. Annoyed, Melusine tried to turn her face away, but that restless hand continued its journey down to caress between her legs. Kieran shamelessly uttered a suggestive phrase, "We have to get you completely wet, you know." His finger pressed down firmly, making Melusine jolt. She couldn't help but let out sensual moans, her whole body trembling, cheeks flushed red as she begged Kieran in a broken voice. "No, this is strange. This is too strange." He leaned down. His gentle breath whispered in her ear, "Relax." Melusine's hands gripped the back of Kieran's shirt tightly, the building climax making her body convulse. Trembling, Melusine wrapped her arms around his neck. Kieran smiled in satisfaction. "You did very well." Lying on the bed, her eyes were in a daze. "This is somehow different from that other time. That wasn't just sleeping together. It seems like this is how you really make a baby." Just then, Kieran suddenly lifted Melusine. Setting her on his lap, she asked in surprise, "Kieran, isn't it over?" He looked straight into her ocean blue eyes and smiled softly. "What do you mean over? The night is still very long." Moonlight streamed through the window, and inside the room, suggestive moans that would make anyone blush filled the air. Kieran gently pressed the tip of Melusine's tongue, reminding her softly, "Don't bite your tongue." He lifted her waist, thrusting deep inside. Melusine hurriedly covered her mouth to stifle any embarrassing sounds, and then everything froze as a powerful current shot through her. It pierced through her body, and an unsettling feeling churned in her stomach. It felt so good that the sounds escaped on their own. Kieran continued to push his finger against her tongue, gritting his teeth as he softly chided, "I told you to relax." The lazy moonlight drifted past the window. It illuminated a dark corner of the room. Where two bodies were tangled together, Melusine's mind was in a daze. "This is the first time I've ever felt this way. It's so strange and confusing, but it feels so good. So it's possible to like something and find it strange at the same time. I want to see Kieran's face." The moment she had the thought, she suddenly reached out. Gently but firmly, she held his face. The pull wasn't strong, but it was enough to make Kieran lean down. Before he could react, Melusine quickly closed the distance between their lips, giving him a gentle kiss. After pulling away, she looked directly into his eyes and gave him a captivating smile. "I like this so much." Kieran froze for a few seconds. Finally, unable to hold back any longer, he relaxed, leaning down and swearing softly, "Damn it." Their two bodies remained connected. His rough hand played with her tangled hair, which was splayed across the wrinkled sheets amidst the sounds of rushed, heavy breathing. A long night passed just like that, and on what morning it was, no one knew, but dawn stretched over the Grand Duke's mansion. Playful sunlight streamed through the window, waking Melusine, who frowned slightly as she groggily opened her eyes. Noticing the movement, Anne approached with concern. Milady, are you awake?" She worriedly felt her forehead. Once she confirmed your condition, she smiled in relief. "Thank goodness you're finally awake. You wouldn't wake up for 2 whole days, so I was terribly worried." "Milady, are you feeling all right?" With Anne holding her face, Melusine struggled to speak. "Ah, I'm fine. Where is this?" Anne helped her sit up and replied, "This is your room, milady. Are you hurt anywhere?" As her senses returned, Melusine couldn't help but look around and ask, "Where is Kieran?" Anne hesitated. "The Grand Duke. He isn't here. He went out to welcome a guest." Hearing that, she tilted her head and wondered, "A guest?" Anne's voice trailed off. "Yes, that's because the young lady of Marquis Hesno has arrived." "The young lady of Marquis Hesno? Is that the Grand Duke's fiancée?" Melusine asked naively as Anne explained while brushing her hair. "So does that mean it's just one man and one woman?" Anne nodded slightly. "Yes, you only marry a single person. You swear before the gods that you'll be devoted to only one person for your entire life, and the step before that is the engagement." Melusine asked curiously, "But Kieran slept with me and that beautiful woman, didn't he?" She explained further, "That's different from marriage. Since it's before he's married, the Grand Duke is allowed to be with others. Actually, because he is of the direct royal bloodline, he can pretty much do whatever he wants." Even though it was explained very clearly, she still looked confused and turned back to ask, "I still don't understand. If you want to have lots of children, isn't having a few partners a good thing?" Anne broke out in a cold sweat. "My lady, if you say things like that elsewhere, you'll get into huge trouble." "Oh, that's right. Starting this afternoon, I probably won't be able to be here." Melusine was taken aback. "Why?" Anne replied. "The head maid has assigned errands to the youngest maids, so I have to go into town." Melusine's eyes widened as she tilted her head. "What's a town?" Anne thought for a moment, trying to explain it simply. "A town is an area outside the castle walls, where there's a market and lots of people gather. It's especially crowded right now because of the post-harvest Thanksgiving, the biggest festival in the empire, where they sell all sorts of new things. And there are even performances." Hearing that, Melusine's eyes immediately lit up. Her face full of excitement, she exclaimed, "I want to go too!" Anne immediately refused. "That's not possible, my lady. You must rest in your room for the rest of the day." Her eyes immediately welled up with tears. She clasped her hands together, looking at Anne with an adorable expression. "Anne, why can't I go?" Staring at Melusine's face, Anne was left speechless as a dazzling aura of cuteness radiated from her, pushing Anne back. "No, no, no." In the end, because the aura was too dazzling, Anne slowly surrendered. "You can't, but..." And then, the scene shifts to a bustling town square, crowded with people. The maid with them secretly leaned in to whisper in Anne's ear, "Hey, Anne, are you sure it's okay for us to be out with her?" Anne whispered back, "Count Luton already gave us permission. He said he wanted to come himself, and that it would be fine anyway. Since she has trouble walking, she won't be able to go far. Besides, it's thanks to the mermaid lady that we get to ride in a carriage, so we should be thankful for that." Melusine, after looking around at everything for a moment, turned back excitedly. Anne, what is that? Oh, look, it has seaweed on its head. Anne followed her gaze. Ah, do you mean the chicken? Those are feathers on its head. It's a bird, my lady. Then she saw a bald man and shouted, a glowing fish! Anne and the other maids screamed in terror. My lady, stop! Get back in the carriage. Finally, the carriage came to a stop. Anne got out first and said, we've arrived. All right, my lady. I'm just going to that shop over there and I'll be right back. Can you wait here alone? Melusine nodded firmly. Still feeling uneasy, they instructed a soldier, please keep an eye on the lady for us. Asterisk, asterisk, I'm exhausted already. But while no one was looking, Melusine was drawn away, excitedly melting into the crowd. It was full of things she could never see inside the castle. So this is what Kieran's world is like. It has these kinds of sounds and smells? How magical. Just then, a sound reached her, making Melusine freeze in her tracks. She looked doubtfully in the direction the sound came from. These sounds? Could that be the singing voice of a woman? She seemed to be elderly, and because of the shawl she was wearing, I couldn't see her face clearly. Just then, the soldier came over to remind Melusine, my lady, you can't just wander off alone like that. She suddenly grew frantic. Wait just a moment, I can't be mistaken. That's the singing of one of my sisters. He was still dazed and confused. What? Wait. But before he could react, Melusine had already dashed into the crowd, searching for her sister. She's over here. As she emerged from the crowd, she saw an old woman in a black cloak clinging to another woman's skirt, making a scene, I'm dying. The surrounding crowd recoiled in disgust. Is it that old hag again? Don't get near her, you might catch a disease. The woman whined. Oh my goodness. In a way, that special sound seemed to be saying, she must be waiting for me now, right? Sirens get lonely. Melusine approached, communicating in that same language. Hey, what's the matter? Are you in a lot of pain? Hearing this, the old woman looked up, startled. She got up and rushed towards her, grabbing on and stammering, you. Before she could say anything more, she lost her balance and fell to her knees. Melusine looked down worriedly and asked, is it not pain but hunger? The old mermaid nodded her head frantically. My stomach is empty. I'm so hungry. I'm going to die, my sister. You're one of my sisters, aren't you? Please, help me. Knowing she was one of her own people, Melusine gently nodded in agreement. Just then, her soldier escort caught up to her. My lady, something is going to happen if you keep this up. Please get back to the carriage. However, she darted over to a nearby stall, decisively grabbing a fish. Let me have this. Can I have this? My sister is very hungry, he stammered. Your sister? Who's that? Why do you suddenly need a fish? Melusine didn't explain. She just hugged the fish and ran off, leaving only a thank you behind. The soldier reached out for her helplessly. My lady! She ran across the street without looking around, and a horse was suddenly pulled to a sharp halt. The man driving the carriage yelled in anger. Why is some crazy woman running out into the road like this? Get out of the way. Meanwhile, the soldier was blocked by the jostling crowd and couldn't catch up to his lady. Melusine handed the fish to the old woman and then called out as if responding to Kieran. Wait for me a moment. She's hungry, she has to eat first. The angry man raised his hand, ready to strike her. Do you have any idea who you're holding up? At that very moment, Kieran appeared out of nowhere and commanded in a stern voice, put your hand down. The man stared at him, stunned, and stammered. What? Kieran growled. Did you not hear me? I said put your hand down. The terrified man immediately fell to his knees, kowtowing. GG Grand Duke, I apologize, please forgive me. Melusine's face lit up when she saw Kieran, and without a second thought, she ran to him and threw her arms around his tall figure, nuzzling her face against him. She said affectionately, Kieran, I missed you, so much. But his reaction was ice cold. Kieran even turned his head away, looking annoyed. A stunned Melusine looked up. Kieran. Just then, someone stepped down from the carriage. Grand Duke. Estelle, radiant in a wine-red dress, her face lit up with a smile. It really is you. Kieran immediately turned and pushed Melusine behind him. She elegantly lifted her skirt and curtsied. To cause such a commotion upon meeting you after so long, I am truly ashamed. He slowly stepped forward and said, I am also partly responsible for this, my lady. Please don't say that. A smile touched Estelle's lips as she replied, as expected of the Empire's hero, your magnanimity is truly exceptional. I heard you recently achieved another great feat? Kieran ignored her question and asked one of his own. I heard from the Marquis that you weren't supposed to arrive until next week? She laughed teasingly. I suppose I was just too eager, wasn't I? I'm very curious about your Qin Citadel, Grand Duke. So I wanted to come as quickly as possible to see if it's just as I imagined. After all, this place is to become my home soon. Kieran then glanced briefly at Melusine behind him. Meanwhile, Estelle continued to chatter on. Surely I haven't been impolite? He immediately turned his head back to reply. Not at all. Let's walk together from here. She beamed. I'm so glad you suggested it. Suddenly, Estelle tilted her head, her gaze fixing on a certain point with displeasure. Kieran politely offered his arm to escort her. She quickly placed her hand on his. I wouldn't dream of refusing such an honor, Grand Duke. But who is this young lady? Might I ask for an introduction? Melusine flinched at the question, standing there dumbfounded. But Kieran dismissively said, there's no need. He glanced coldly in her direction and said, as you can see, my lady, the pets we keep tend to cause trouble. Estelle laughed. I see. It's true that the more beautiful the pet, the harder it is to control. Melusine slowly reached out a hand and stepped forward, softly calling to him. His voice became stern, as if giving a command, Melusine, behave. Afterwards, the carriage rode further and further into the distance. Melusine stood silently watching it go, her eyes filled with disappointment. Kieran, that strange look on his face. She suddenly felt a pang in her chest, but Melusine still didn't know what that feeling was. Just then, the old mermaid she had helped suddenly stood up and walked over, a smile curving her lips. Muttering in a language only Melusine could understand, listen, when the time comes, you must choose the sea. You must. The old mermaid gripped her wrist tightly, making her turn pale with pain. Melusine's reflection shone in her eyes. Her mouth kept repeating, if you hesitate, it will be too late. It will be too late. A few days later, Melusine was listlessly lying in bed. Seeing this, Anne asked with concern, Lady Mermaid, are you going to stay in your room all day today too? The weather is absolutely beautiful right now. She just nodded mechanically, mumbled an M-A-M-M, and then muttered to herself again. He didn't come today either. Anne could only offer a comforting smile. I already told you, my lady. The Grand Duke has been very busy lately. He'll come find you as soon as he's finished with his work. Melusine turned to ask, can't I go? If I go to town, can't I see Kieran there? Anne stammered in surprise. That's not allowed. If you just wait here obediently, he will come back. Just endure it for a little while, okay? Hearing that, she pressed her lips together and said nothing, then pouted and turned away. Anne, flustered, tried to persuade her. If you're feeling stuffy, shall we go for a walk? They just planted some very beautiful new roses in the garden. If you see them, I'm sure your mood will improve. In the garden, large blossoms bloomed, vying to show off their beauty. Even after walking for a while, Melusine's mood hadn't improved much. Anne is such a liar. Coming out to the garden wasn't fun at all. She then turned to look in a certain direction, where she had come with Kieran before. Kieran. Just then, a sharp voice rang out. Hey, could you get out of the way? Startled, Melusine looked up. Before her, Estelle tilted her head and chuckled lightly behind an exquisite folding fan. Pardon me, my lady. At that moment, she looked up and met Melusine's gaze, feigning surprise. Oh, I didn't see you there. Turns out we've met before, haven't we? Do you remember me, miss? Then Estelle quickly approached. I'm so happy to meet you again like this. What was your name again? I believe the Grand Duke called you something? She quickly replied, Melusine. The woman's eyes curved in appreciation. That's right. What a beautiful and unique name. Estelle then moved closer, suggesting, what do you say, Lady Melusine? If you don't mind, would you like to take a walk with me? Two intertwined shadows stretched across the ground. As they walked, Estelle spoke. Last time, things were so chaotic, so I wasn't able to greet you properly. I wonder, which family are you from, Lady Melusine? Ah, no. Perhaps I should ask, which country you're from? Melusine listened, dazed and confused. She bit her lip and looked down, thinking to herself, she's asking such difficult questions. I should have come with Anne. Is she asking where I'm from? Estelle began to speculate. Is it the kingdom of Clement? Or perhaps Mackillen's? Melusine shook her head. No, that's not it. I'm from Vexus. The woman furrowed her brow in doubt. Vatican? She affirmed in a firm voice, the Vatican Sea. Estelle grew more and more confused. How strange. As far as I know, there are no countries along the Vatican coast, only a few barren islands where only merfolk live. So, are you saying you're a legendary mermaid, my lady? Melusine smiled innocently and admitted, yes. An insolent shout interrupted as Estelle's maid stomped over and scolded her. Where do you come from, daring to tell such an absurd lie? Estelle, maintaining her fake smile, said, it's all right, I find it interesting. That's right. She paused for a moment, then glanced down at Melusine's bare feet. Then she smirked knowingly. This explains why the Grand Duke calls you a pet he's raising. What a relief, now I can rest easy. I was originally quite worried, because he's never kept anything before. But if it's a mermaid, it's certainly worth the effort, because everyone in this world wants to possess such a precious prize. Immediately, Estelle used her fan to lift Melusine's face, scrutinizing it before roughly pushing it away. The woman turned and walked away leisurely. I never expected the Grand Duke to have such a human side to him. Discovering this different side of him, on the contrary, makes me even happier. Melusine held her face, asking dazedly, What is your name? Estelle tilted her head back to look at her and introduced herself. I am Estelle Hesno, daughter of Marquis Hesno, and I am also engaged to Grand Duke Kieran, Lady Melusine. This better be the last time you act so disrespectfully, Melusine. Hearing that, she was momentarily stunned. Estelle, the engagement. Even though she didn't fully understand everything Estelle was saying, she suddenly asked, "Then, have you also spent the night with Kieran?" Estelle froze, the smile instantly vanishing from her face as she glared and snarled. Being too licentious is no longer interesting. Estelle turned back, pressing the fan in her hand firmly against Melusine's chest. "How dare you question me? You're asking me that? Just because you somehow caught the Grand Duke's attention and he held you in his arms? Do you think the world revolves around you now? Or perhaps you've gotten pregnant during that time?" The maid behind her gasped in alarm. "My lady, you..." But Melusine, still so naive, clutched her stomach as she backed away. "Not yet, but soon." Estelle scoffed, cutting her off. "Soon? So you're clinging to that kind of hope, are you, Melusine? How pathetic. Keep that up, and you might really die." Melusine froze at her words. "Die?" Estelle sneered. "Don't you know why I've been leaving you alone? For the nobles of this empire, having one or two lovers is hardly a big deal. What's important is not to disrupt the line of succession. Do you think that in a country where even innocent, illegitimate children are so heavily scorned, more than the promiscuous people who bore them, the Grand Duke would ever want you to carry his child? Aren't you already suffering from the rumor that you're the late Emperor's illegitimate child? You are utterly useless to the Grand Duke. Even if you were to bear his child, both you and the baby would die at his hands. So, I hope you continue to drown alone in that dream for as long as you possibly can, Melusine." Having said her piece, Estelle finally turned to leave, and Melusine watched her go with a bewildered expression. She, on the other hand, left with the remark, "I had a very pleasant stroll." That evening in the grand mansion, the light from a room spilled out of the window. Inside, wine glasses were set on a table, and Marquis Hasno's voice could be heard. "I heard you met Estelle outside the city. For her to leave in such a rush, it must have been to see you immediately. I'm sure you were very surprised. But I hope you will generously overlook it." Grand Duke Kieran leisurely sipped his wine before speaking. "I paid it no mind to begin with, so there is no need for you to apologize, Marquis." The man gave a strained laugh. "You have always been like a block of ice." He smirked. "So what? Didn't you seek me out privately before the ball because there was something you wished to discuss?" Marquis Hasno nodded slightly. "I wish to ask your opinion on the matter of seizing the throne. Do you perhaps have a different view on the opportune moment?" Grand Duke Kieran leaned back elegantly in his chair, replying nonchalantly, "You are the one who has been acting recklessly as of late. On the contrary, I should be the one asking you why you are in such a rush." The Marquis burst into laughter. "As expected, nothing gets past you, Grand Duke. This winter, won't the new Imperial Palace, the Soda Palace, be completed? Just imagine it, Grand Duke. The Emperor meeting his death in the very beautiful palace that he has so eagerly awaited, heralding the dawn of a new Emperor's era. Wouldn't that be a truly magnificent sight?" Hearing this, Kieran calmly inquired, "So you're saying that once the palace is complete, we kill the Emperor and seize the throne?" Marquis Hasno raised a hand to explain, "There are many nobles targeting us, and they are using the palace's renovation as an opportunity. Everything is in chaos. We can use this opportunity." He sat up straight, interrupting. "Next spring, the Empress will give birth to a prince. If we're not careful, it won't just be chaos within the country, but the surrounding nations will also seize the chance to rebel." The Marquis scratched his head awkwardly. "You have a good point, but I've been preparing for a very long time. If we keep waiting, I'm worried there might be a mole, and the nobles' dissatisfaction with the Emperor isn't exactly a recent development." Kieran tilted his head in doubt. "The nobles' dissatisfaction? Didn't you want to clear away all obstacles for Lady Estelle before her marriage?" Marquis Hasno was stunned, looking guilty. He continued to expose him. "Make me the Emperor quickly, so that your only daughter can secure her position as Empress." At this, Marquis Hasno began to stammer and laugh awkwardly. How could that be, Your Highness?" Kieran let out a cold laugh and raised his wine glass again. "I was just joking. It's been a while, so I got a little carried away. I know what you're worried about, and I will consider this matter carefully." The man was quickly grateful. "Thank you, Your Highness. There is one other thing. About my alliance with you, Your Highness. It's not just to make my daughter the Empress. My true lord has always been you, and you alone, Your Highness." Kieran just waved it off. He calmly took a sip of wine before replying nonchalantly, "Then I suppose I should thank you." Later, after the door was closed, the Marquis's subordinate asked curiously, "So, did His Highness the Grand Duke object again?" The man let out a sigh of relief. How could he? The subordinate hesitated. "But His Highness has rejected our plan many times before." Marquis Hasno, full of confidence, said, "Rest assured, the one who hates the Emperor more than any of us is none other than His Highness the Grand Duke. The Emperor has sent His Highness to the battlefield countless times. Instead of being controlled, wouldn't it be much better to usurp the throne? He agreed to the marriage alliance with the Estelle family for this very reason, and more importantly, His Highness the Grand Duke holds a deep-seated, bloody grudge against the late Emperor, so you can rest easy. His Highness the Grand Duke will certainly never betray us." Back in the room, Kieran was now alone, sitting silently with his half-empty glass of wine, he gazed quietly into the distance as a memory of a younger Kieran surfaced. He was kneeling on the ground, crying and begging in fear. "Please, don't do this." The late emperor slowly approached and said in a cold voice, "I am truly heartbroken, Kieran. Do you still not understand? That time on the battlefield when I killed your master, did it anger you that much? Are you still obsessed with that ungrateful traitor?" He looked up, trembling, and stammered incoherently. The man's voice deepened. Marquis Hesno said that after killing Duncan, you've been having nightmares, and even said you never want to return to the battlefield again. You are the future Grand Duke of this country. How can you be so weak? The late emperor forcefully pulled on the whip in his hand and said coldly, "Today, I must correct this bad habit of yours." Marquis, close the door. Marquis Hasno had no way to defy the order, so he could only step outside, leaving Kieran alone with him. "Yes, your majesty." The cold, creaking sound of the sliding door echoed, causing Kieran to tremble more and more. Through the narrow crack in the door, only a pair of bewildered eyes could be seen. His tear-filled, fearful eyes, but in the end, they were shut tight, leaving no opening. "Back in the present," Kieran scoffed, placing a hand on his forehead as he mocked that scumbag. And yet he dared to claim that from start to finish, he saw me as his one and only lord. Just then, Ian opened the door and came in. "Your Highness, are you just lounging around?" He lazily asked what was up, and Ian reported that a maid had said that this afternoon, Lady Estelle of the Marquis's house would be taking a walk in the garden with the Mermaid lady. Kieran let out a cold laugh after hearing that. Her attitude at the market had been very strange. She still went to confirm it for herself in the end. Ian was filled with regret. "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have let her go out. Should we just lock her in her room now?" He calmly analyzed. Estelle is an intelligent girl. She can certainly tell whether Melusine is a threat to her position or not. It's not necessarily a good thing for us to openly protect her. So for now, we'll watch quietly from the shadows. Let her see that I have absolutely no interest in Melusine, and wait for her to confirm my stance. She'll naturally learn to keep her distance. One day, as Estelle was brushing her hair in her room, a worried voice called out, That one?" She glanced over her shoulder. "So you've finally come. You're Melusine's maid?" Anne asked nervously, My lady, did you need me for something?" Estelle stood up and said kindly, "There's no need to be so frightened. I want to befriend Melusine. The masquerade ball is in a few days, and it would be so much fun if she could join. Could you bring her here?" Anne's face paled as she stammered an explanation. The mermaid. I mean, the young lady? She is not feeling well." She swallowed hard, steeling her resolve. I can't let the lady of the Marquis's house meet the mermaid lady." The Count's earlier warning was still ringing clearly in her head. Back then, Ian had stressed repeatedly, unless His Highness personally gives the order when it comes to matters concerning the mermaid, no one is to act on their own accord. Yes, the mermaid lady was a special existence to His Highness, the Grand Duke. I absolutely cannot let her go out without permission. Hearing this, Estelle sighed, her voice tinged with regret. "So it can't be done?" Anne said anxiously. "Yes, that's right. I'm truly sorry." She tilted her head slightly, the corners of her lips curling into a cold smirk. "Sorry?" The moment she said that, Anne was immediately seized by two of Estelle's maids, who grabbed her arms and forced her to her knees. Estelle stepped forward, her voice dripping with condescension. "I wasn't asking you. That was an order." Anne's entire body trembled, her eyes wide with terror. Seeing this, she softened her tone, the smile on her face turning gentle. "All right, let's try this again from the top." Sitting down in a chair, Estelle crossed her legs and asked nonchalantly, "Why do we have to make things so difficult when there isn't an ounce of trust between us? Wouldn't you agree?" Anne just kept kneeling on the floor, trembling, not daring to utter another word. She waited in silence for a moment, but when she got no response, she finally spoke. "Fine, let's do it this way. I hear you have 3 younger siblings to take care of. His Highness the Grand Duke has won countless victories on the battlefield since he was a boy, so I'm sure your brother would learn a great deal if he were sent there." At this, Anne flew into a panic, desperately grabbing the hem of Estelle's dress and pleading, "No, please don't, my lady. My younger brother is still too young." Estelle shot her a cold glance. "Don't you want me to help you learn some things through a more practical demonstration?" Anne trembled more and more, finally gritting her teeth and nodding. I was wrong, my lady. I'll do whatever you say. Please, spare my siblings." Hearing what she wanted, Estelle's expression softened. "Wouldn't it have been better to be this well-behaved from the start? Then I'll be waiting for you." A few days later, as dusk fell, Melusine was being meticulously dolled up by her maid. "All right, a bow still goes best with the dress. Let's use this coral color." Her makeup was now complete. She changed into a form-fitting outfit, which further enhanced her stunning beauty. Seeing her maid hurriedly tidying up and about to leave, Melusine tilted her head and asked, "Anne, where are you going?" The maid jumped, setting the box down on the table, and answered in a small voice, "Lady Mermaid, I told you before, didn't I? This week is the Autumn Harvest Festival." Melusine nodded slightly, her eyes lighting up. "You did say that, and that there would be lots of magical things. There are flowers, and candy, and... Anne just forced a smile, her voice fading as her anxiety became obvious. "Today is the last day of the festival. There will be a grand banquet tonight, and you will be attending, wearing a mask and meeting many people." But Melusine paid no mind to her hesitation, asking eagerly, "If I'm meeting people, will Kieran be there? Can I meet Kieran there?" Just then, there was a knock on the door, and Anne jumped, startled. She broke out in a cold sweat, stammering, "No, not today." Before she could finish, the door opened, and Estelle's maid came in and announced, "Lady Estelle invites Lady Melusine to join her. Are you ready?" Anne had to feign confusion. "La Lady Estelle?" Melusine looked at the maid, a hint of surprise in her sparkling eyes. "Estelle." The maid bowed her head, her voice flat. "Yes, Our Lady wishes to see Lady Melusine. Please come immediately. And one more thing. Although it is summer, the nights are quite cold, so you must wear shoes." Panicked, Anne quickly knelt to put the shoes on her. "Yes, of course. Please wait just a moment." But Melusine frowned a little, her voice soft. "Anne, I don't want to wear shoes." Anne suppressed her anxiety and pleaded gently, "Please, just for today, could you endure it, Lady Mermaid? Once you get to the banquet, you might see His Highness, the Grand Duke." Then, while she was still bent low, she leaned close to Melusine and whispered with a tremor in her voice, "When you see him, you have to ask him for help. You understand?" Melusine froze, her eyes showing clear confusion. She was then roughly pulled down the hall by Estelle's maid. "We don't have any more time, hurry up!" Melusine tried to protest. "Wait, hold on a minute!" The maid ignored her, dragging her all the way to a large door before finally stopping. "You must wear this now." The maid handed Melusine a wine-red mask and even helped her put it on. The door then opened, and Melusine was pushed inside. Her mind was reeling in confusion. What in the world is going on? I don't understand anything. Will I really get to see Kieran, like Anne said? This place feels really weird. She stepped into a hall decorated in elegant shades of gold. Melusine gasped in awe. As she stood there dumbfounded, a man in a mask approached her. "Excuse me, miss, are you lost?" Another man appeared behind him, and a startled Melusine turned and stammered. I'm looking for Kieran. Where is he?" Hearing the name Kieran, the man was taken aback. "Are you talking about His Grace, the Grand Duke?" The person next to him leaned in and whispered, "Come to think of it, I believe I've seen that pink hair before. Is she the one who was with the Grand Duke outside the city walls?" The moment he said that, countless eyes in the hall turned to her. A woman feigned surprise. "Oh my goodness, who is this? And she's wearing the mask of a lowly dancer." From the crowd, Estelle stepped forward and sneered. "I heard you and the Grand Duke returned to the castle together, so who knows? Maybe she's a dancer His Grace sent to entertain us at the party." At this, the crowd burst into laughter, as if it all made sense. "That's our Grand Duke for you, always knowing how to keep us entertained." Suddenly, someone grabbed Melusine's hair and pulled, causing her to cry out in pain. A circle of men surrounded Melusine, their eyes filled with lust. "Pink hair. How did you get something so precious? Dancers really are such seductresses." "Hey, hurry up and dance for us." Melusine began to panic, her lips trembling as she tried to refuse. "No, I don't want to." A hand suddenly grabbed her shoulder. Estelle pulled Melusine towards her and said, "So nice to meet you." Her voice trembled as she replied, "Estelle?" The woman glared at her, her voice dripping with scorn. "Melusine, it seems you still don't understand your place. Can you feel how much they need you right now? Don't you see it's the same way the Grand Duke treats you?" "Huh?" Melusine shook her head frantically, trying to pull away from Estelle's grasp. "No, it's not the same. Kieran isn't like that." But she only held on tighter. "It's useless to struggle. No one is going to help you." With that, Estelle gave her a hard shove forward. Melusine stumbled and began to fall, her face pale and her voice trembling. "No!" Just as she was about to hit the ground, a firm hand caught her. She looked up with teary eyes at the person who saved her. It was none other than Grand Duke Kieran. But because he was wearing a mask, Melusine didn't recognize him at first and asked fearfully, "Who are you?" From behind the mask, a pair of familiar eyes gazed down at her. Melusine looked up, her heart racing as she held her breath. "It has to be him!" She joyfully hugged him and whispered, "Kieran, it's Kieran!" But he didn't respond. Then he abruptly grabbed her hand and pulled her away. She struggled to keep up with his quick pace, leaving the crowd behind them confused. Hey, wait!" One of the men started to follow. "What's going on all of a sudden?" The person behind him quickly stopped him. "Wait, hold on! I think that Kieran guy is the Grand Duke." Hearing this, the man flinched, nearly tripping over his own feet. "What?" The women were bewildered. Why did he suddenly get so angry? Estelle stood silently, just watching. She appeared calm on the outside, but the veins popping on her jaw betrayed her. That composure was just a thin veil hiding the rage simmering within. Kieran dragged Melusine out to a quiet part of the estate. He had taken off his mask, his voice tight with suppressed anger. "I told you to stay put. Why do you always do the things I tell you not to do?" Melusine's face turned bright red as she stammered. "I missed you. Kieran, I missed you, so I came to see you." Kieran raised her chin with his hand, his voice low. "Showing up here dressed like this, and you say you missed me? Is this how you want me to treat you?" He ripped the mask off Melusine's face. Without letting her say another word, Kieran leaned down and devoured Melusine's soft lips. Their breaths mingled, the sound of their kiss echoing suggestively. Melusine slowly wrapped her arms around him, kissing him back. She liked it, but it wasn't enough. Just then, Kieran pulled away from her lips and slowly moved to her shoulder, pressing a kiss there. His warm breath on her skin was intoxicating. A little, just a little more. At that moment, Kieran suddenly stopped and called out, "Melusine." He stood up straight and ordered, "This is your last chance. Stop being impulsive and go back obediently." As Kieran turned to leave, she quickly reached out and grabbed his sleeve. He stopped, looking back at Melusine as she confessed in a small voice, "I miss you. Will you come to my room again?" "Kieran, aren't you curious about me at all?" He slowly turned around, his rough hand gently touching her cheek. "I think you're mistaken." In the garden, Kieran stood facing Melusine, his expression cold and emotionless. "To me, you're not that important. There was never anything between us from the start. Even if you have some other feelings for me, don't bother me anymore." With that, he turned and walked away. Before leaving, he glanced back and added, "Your feelings are just an illusion, Melusine." The sound of his footsteps echoed, each one striking deep into Melusine's heart. He left her there in the garden, all alone. The moment Kieran left, Estelle, as if on cue, approached from behind and sneered, "After causing such a scene at the party, you end up hiding here." She laughed mockingly. "A meticulously pruned flower garden. And here you are, the very picture of His Highness's innocence. If that was all, I could have tolerated it. This is your first time at a banquet, so I came especially to take care of you." With that, she stepped closer, took off her own mask, and threw it to the ground. "Especially this mask. This is the kind worn by dancers, and dancers are nothing more than commodities for entertainment. Didn't His Highness ask why you were wearing this mask?" Estelle smiled, her eyes filled with contempt, "Because in his eyes, you're nothing but a lowlife." After Estelle finished speaking, Melusine turned to her, eyes glistening with tears. "Estelle, do you hate me?" Estelle just smiled, feigning a generous air. "I don't hate you, I just hope that you'll learn your place. Do you still want to bear the Grand Duke's child?" Melusine nodded. "Chelena's child, yes, I want to." Estelle's expression remained calm. "You can never have it, because you're just a toy, and no one worries about a toy when it breaks." Then, Estelle moved closer and gently stroked Melusine's hair. "You're made up so beautifully, even though it must be unpleasant to be toyed with." She looked directly into Melusine's eyes. "But that's all it is. No one stays with a doll forever. When they get bored, they just toss it aside." Estelle turned to leave. Melusine asked curiously, "Toss it aside?" As if to answer her question, Estelle looked back. "Otherwise, why would His Highness abandon you here all alone? You've been discarded." Hearing this, Melusine's heart skipped a beat, her face filled with devastation. "I've been discarded." She suddenly remembered what Kieran had told her just moments ago, that these feelings were just her delusion. "Melusine, stop bothering me." Every single cold word was like a knife carving into her heart. "Because he thinks I'm a nuisance. Did Kieran just throw me away?" I know that term, thrown away. She remembered how back in the ocean, her sisters who couldn't bear children would say they had been thrown away. Being thrown away means it's the end, that there's no going back. So Kieran and I are over too, and Melusine stood alone in the garden. As the sun began to set, her pink hair fluttered gently in the wind, her expression completely numb. "So, Kieran and I are finished, just like that." As Kieran walked out of the garden, his mind was filled with the image from that moment in the garden. "I missed you so much, Kieran. I came here because I missed you." He stood there, lost in thought. Suddenly, a voice pulled him back to reality. "Why are you just standing there?" "Your Highness?" Kieran turned to see Estelle. She stood with her arms crossed, her tone nonchalant as if nothing had happened. "Looks like you've lost something, haven't you? But I don't see anything over there." Kieran chuckled, his voice laced with sarcasm. He replied with a laugh, "Thank you for always keeping such a close eye on me from behind." "You?" Estelle feigned a laugh, pretending not to hear the sarcasm in his voice. "In that case, would you grant me one request? Dance with me tonight. They say the couple who shares the last dance at the autumn Thanksgiving ball will be happy forever. Yes, for a very, very long time, perhaps for a lifetime. You will agree, won't you, Your Grace?" Kieran asked, "Why do you feel the need to do this? I don't understand what you mean." Estelle casually waved the fan in her hand. "Very well. Let me put it this way. A buzzing insect can be ignored, but if it's a venomous one, then treating it with poison is the smartest choice." Her eyes no longer held their initial warmth. but had gradually turned cruel. You give a doll a sword, play with it until you're bored, and then toss it aside. She held out her hand, offering a smile that was gentle, yet utterly vile. Your Highness, do you really not want to take my hand? Kieran simply walked past her, his expression unreadable. Excuse me, I dropped something in the garden. He walked away without another glance, leaving Estelle with her hand still outstretched. The smile was still frozen on her face. She clenched her fist and let out a self-deprecating laugh. Meanwhile, Melusine was standing on a shore. She was lost in memories of her time in the ocean, of her sisters whispering to her how incredibly difficult it was to have a child. Almost no one succeeds on their first try. So, if you sense any danger, or if things aren't going your way, you can always come back. Don't forget, for us, the most important thing is our children. Those words were seared into her mind, along with Estelle's. If I have a child, Kieran will kill me. Even if she gave birth, both she and her child would die by his hand. Yes, that was it. Melusine clutched the hem of her dress. Even if it's just for the baby's sake, I should find a different siren. She steeled her resolve and walked towards the sea, her feet touching the waves that seemed to welcome her home. First, I'll go back to my sisters. If they ask where I've been, I'll tell them I was caught in a human's net and nearly lost my life. She thought to herself, I'll tell them about Kieran, about how I thought he was my siren. But that was just my imagination. Thinking this, Melusine felt incredibly heartbroken and sorry for herself. While she was lost in thought, a sudden ragged breath was heard, and Kieran rushed towards her, grabbing Melusine's hand tightly. Since when did this place become your room? Kieran's grip was forceful, making Melusine cry out softly in pain. She looked at him in surprise. Kieran is that you, Kieran? Panting from running so fast. His face was filled with anger, veins popping. I told you not to do as you please. This is your last chance. Then he grabbed Melusine, threw her over his shoulder, and started walking. Melusine was startled and looked back at him. Kieran, wait a minute. Kieran's large hand covered her mouth tightly, and he leaned down to whisper in Melusine's ear, Shut up, don't say anything right now. He placed her on the horse's back, letting her lean against his chest. Melusine noticed his ragged breathing and thought to herself, Kieran was a little out of breath. She turned her head, her face filled with hurt and resentment. Why did you come for me? Why? Kieran, let me go, so I won't bother you anymore. Kieran doesn't need me anymore. Kieran didn't understand why Melusine was sulking. I said I don't need you? Who said that? I don't understand what you're talking about. We'll talk when we get back to the castle. So she pushed him away forcefully, yelling, I don't need you, Kieran. If you don't need me, then coming here. She didn't finish, only thinking that if Kieran really didn't need her. I want to confirm if Kieran is truly my two-legged siren. Melusine hesitated for a moment, then wrapped her arms around Kieran's neck. The two shared a deep, passionate kiss. As Kieran gently bit her lip, his hand slid down to caress her smooth, white thigh. I want to have Kieran's child. Suddenly, Kieran pushed her forward, forcing her down against the horse's back. Lie down and hold on tight. Melusine struggled in alarm, but it was no use. Kieran leaned down and whispered softly in her ear, And here you were, trying to run away? He held her tightly from behind. From now on, I forbid you from thinking about anything else. I'm going to make you like this. Melusine trembled, only able to grip the reins tightly. Her face flushed as she pleaded, Kieran, I'm scared. It's too fast. His face was also flushing, sweat beading on his forehead. Hold on tight, he reassured her. I'm here. After he spoke, Melusine wrapped her arms around his neck and gave him a kiss. By the time the two of them returned to the castle, it was nighttime. Inside the room, clothes were strewn all over the floor as Kieran pushed her onto the bed. He held her hands tightly, kissing her cheek softly, as moans escaped Melusine's throat. Her eyes glazed over, and Melusine, feeling extremely embarrassed, shut her eyes tightly so she wouldn't have to see him. Her hands clutched Kieran's neck. Seeing her embarrassment, Kieran grabbed her chin, his voice low and seductive. Melusine, don't close your eyes. Look at me just like this. She opened her eyes to look at him. Okay, I'll only look at you, Kieran. So please don't leave. Melusine wrapped her arms around Kieran's neck, pulling him into an embrace. I'll give you anything you like. Please don't go. Hearing Melusine's pleading, clinging to him like a little kitten, Kieran let out a doting smile. His tone carried a hint of teasing. Something I like? I don't like anything at all. What should we do? He said, looking down at Melusine on the bed. He continued to tease. But it's good that you're trying so hard. So let's see you give it your best shot. But Melusine gasped in surprise. Kieran, right there. Ah, it feels so good now. She clung to him and begged, I want more. In the lavish room, two people were tangled together, as if they wanted to become one. Melusine's face glowed with a warm, blissful happiness, wishing they could live like this forever. After a peaceful, passionate night, Melusine finally woke up. She groggily looked around. What is this? She glanced over at Kieran lying beside her.